So as you can see here, we have 3 bar stools, and we've had these for a little bit of time, and one of them has held up pretty well. No issues with the support, but both of these other 2 have a portion that has really no support underneath. It's broken. So we're just gonna take these chairs apart and see if we can get them fixed up. So here we have one of the chairs upside down, and the initial approach I thought we'd have to take in this repair was to remove some of these little nails, these decorative nails across the bottom of the chair, and get to it that way, but that proved to be a little more difficult. So we're gonna actually approach it from the underside by first removing these 6 screws that hold the base on. So let's do that first. All right, all those screws have been unscrewed from the top. I'm just gonna set the bottom aside now, and you can see that there's just staples holding on this cover. So we're gonna take a little bit of time with a flathead screwdriver and pull these out, and then we'll just use a needle nose plier set to make sure we get them all the way out. Okay, so we're on our last staple here. I'm just gonna get this screwdriver under it, take my needle nose, roll it out of there. And then what we're gonna see underneath this, we wanna keep this cover because we'll use it later. But what you'll see underneath is that cheap wood that they use to support this chair. Remember, one side was fine and the other side's broken out. Eventually this other side would break. So we're gonna take all this out of here and show you how to put a little stronger piece of wood to make this nice and stable to continue using it. All right, so what we need to do is just clean out some of this stuff and clear it for the new wood that we're gonna put in here. So you just have to kind of break it up. It's glued, so you press down to remove it. Again, on this side, it wasn't broken, but we want to get rid of it because it would eventually break. So as we break that up, we can tear pieces out, set them aside. Another thing you're going to need to do is get these little blocks out. Now I've noticed in some of these stools, some have more than others. This one happened to have 6 blocks in it. But anytime you see these blocks, you just take the screwdriver, pry them out of there. We won't need to use those. Okay, we've got all this cleared out of here. You can see the destruction here. And there's a few approaches we can take, and it depends a little bit on what kind of wood you have available. I believe both will be sturdy enough to get this stool fixed. One is to use a little bit thicker wood. This is a 5/8 inch wood, and cut it down and fill each of these spaces in. And we're going to do one chair like that and one with another method. But that allows it to be real sturdy and just fills these spots, leaving the middle support. Another approach is to use something similar to what they had originally, but you can see it's a thicker wood. So this is a 3/16 piece of wood that I have. And I'm going to do one of the chairs with this and just slide it into the bottom. But to do that, we'll have to remove this center support. So again, that's the first one we're going to do and see how that works. To remove this center piece, I'm going to use a multi-tool with this blade and just use it to cut down each side of the stool to remove that piece, and then we can lay that thinner board right in here. This is a piece of that 3/16 wood, and what I did is I just cut it to the width of this inside, but as you can see, I made it long on this side. So it's about, maybe 1/2 inch, 5/8 long, so it'll set in there nicely. What I also did is added 2 holes. I just measured center both directions and then split those in half and did a 1-inch hole on each side. And those are for the air as someone sits on the chair, so the air can come out through that hole. If you remember, the old piece had holes in it as well. So what you do is you just take this piece and we're gonna just set it down in the chair. You just press that foam down with the piece of wood and slide it under. We're just gonna keep sliding it until it comes in on this side. You notice it's now able to slide in. You just push it down, and then slide it back a little using those air holes. What you want to do is just kind of get it even under both sides. So again, this is center, so you can use those holes to line up center, and that'll give you a nice support. And then we'll be able to put this piece back center and get this thing wrapped up. All right, now that this piece is in place, we need to put in the supports to make sure it's solid. So if you'll recall, I measured this in such a way that I could get it down in here in one piece, which meant I had to make the sides exactly the width of this seat. So to support the sides, I've cut these little pieces that will just sit right down in each side. Got this other one here. And in fact, I had to bevel them a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. I cut at an angle because each of these sides were at an angle. And so what I'm going to do again is glue each side. And then I'm going to take a nail gun. Now this is an 18 gauge brad nailer. I'm using 1.5-inch nails to put those pieces in place. And as you can see, when I nail those through, that nail is going to go all the way through the support piece and then sufficiently into the side of the seat to keep that in place. So I'll glue with some wood glue and then just tack that along the edges. All right, we have the side piece glued and nailed on both sides. So now we just have to support the middle. So we'll get our original piece and add a little bit of glue down the middle. And I've marked center on both sides with a pencil so I know exactly where center is. And you don't want to go down too far. In fact, I'm lifting that wood piece just to put pressure back on that center support so I know I'm even. And then with that in place, I can take my nail gun and nail each of these sides in. To hold that in place. With the wood support pieces in place, we're now ready to put this cover back on. So I'm just going to lay that on top. I'm just using a pretty standard T50 staple gun. These are the nails I use. I'm just going to go along each of the sides and make sure everything's even. And then just apply pressure and snap that in place. If it doesn't go all the way in, you can get a little hammer later and tack it down. But we're just going to go through and staple all the way around the edge, and then we'll be able to put our legs back on. So here's that first chair we finished. As you can see, nice and solid, everything's stable, looks good. We didn't have to take these little decorative nails out. So that was one way of fixing the chair using that thinner 3/16 wood. So now we're going to do the second chair using that a little bit thicker wood and putting it in between the two sides to show you that method. So I'm just going to show you a little bit different method than the last one we did using a thicker piece of wood. Now we've already taken this chair, removed the legs, stripped off the back, and cleared off the wood that was broken underneath here. And one thing we found is that the wood on this chair is different than the wood on the previous chair we filmed. You can see the difference in thickness. So this one stood up a little bit better, but it's not quite as thick as that 3/16 we used on the other chair we just fixed. So what I've done is I've cut this piece of wood. Now I had this scrap piece of oak, which is a very strong hard wood. You could probably get away with pine or some other wood. This is a 5/8 thickness, and I just cut it to fit into this section here. So the idea is that you put this piece in place and then nail it from each of the edges. Now because these pieces are thick, you have to use a pretty long nail. These are 15 gauge, 2.5 inch nails. And so you can see if you were to nail in from the side, it would go into that piece of wood pretty well. From these sides, not as much, but I think it would still work. So if you take this approach, what you'd want to do is remove a decorative nail or two on each side carefully. And I use either a flathead screwdriver or maybe even consider one of these 9-in-1 tools, because it has a nice thin blade that would allow you to get in and underneath these. But be careful because it's really easy to damage that material. So again, if you're going to use this method, we put this wood in place, take our nail gun with these longer nails, and then just nail in one here, and then rotate it and nail it where the removed decorative pieces are. You may even put 3 along each edge and just go around each side, making sure that it's in place before you nail it. So that's that method. I think I like our first method a little bit better. It seems to hold up really well, and I just think it's all in all a better solution. Another thing to consider if you go this route is making an air hole in this piece, so as someone sits in the chair, the air can go out of that cushion. So either drill a hole directly in the middle or make sure there's a little bit of a seam on the side. That might work as a way to get the air out. So those are your two methods. Hopefully those help you fix your chairs and you can get more use out of them.